Today's shiur begins at the top of Daf Kuf Yud at the Mishnah. Before we begin the actual text, we glance at the side where we have a topic heading, Malve atoivea choivoi miloive. We have a lender attempting to collect a debt from a borrower. V'haloive moitzi shtar mechira im ta'arich sha'achar halva. The borrower then produces a document, a bill of sale of property, with a date after the date of the loan. Shelechayra nireh, it would appear on the surface of things, she'ein chov, that there is no longer any debt. De'im hoyo adayin chov, had there been, if there still was a debt, hamalve lo hoyo moicher lo yisodeh, the lender wouldn't have sold a field to the borrower, ela goyva choivo, he would have seized the opportunity to simply collect his debt. We now turn to the Mishnah. Hamotzi shtar chov al chavero. A lender produces a bill of debt to collect a debt from a borrower. V'halo, and the other guy, the borrower, hoitzi shemochar loi es hasodeh. The borrower produces a document indicating that this very lender sold him a field. And as we said in our introduction, that would seem to indicate that there is no more any debt. We have a Rashi to look at the top. The borrower produces a bill of sale dated after the loan. And the borrower says, whatever you're trying to collect from me, either it's a forged document or it's been paid up already. If I was still obligated to you, he wouldn't have sold a field to me. You should have been more interested in collecting the debt, the supposed debt. The Mishnah continues. Admoin oimer. This is, as you can see, the sixth of the 7 Admon teachings. The Admon says, Yochol hu shiomar, the borrower can say, as we've explained so far, Ilu hoyisi chayav l'cha, had I been indebted to you, hoya l'cha lo yipora eshelcha kishemacharta li es hasodeh. You should have collected for me the debt when you were selling me the field. V'chachomim oimrim, the sages who disagree with Admon, and they say, Zeh hoya pikeach. This lender was smart, he was shrewd. Shemochar loi es hakarka mipnei shehu yochol lemashkenoi. He sold him the property, thereby enabling him, the lender, an opportunity to seize the land as collateral. This might not be clear yet, this Mishnah, and hence we have to look into the Gemara for further clarification. My taimo de Rabbanan. What is the reasoning behind the Chachomim Shita, the opinion of the Chachomim? Shapir Korma Admon Abon seems to be making very good sense. That if a lender is trying to collect a debt, then how is it that the borrower is able to demonstrate with a deed that the lender had sold him land instead of simply collecting the debt? You can see we have a geometric form, a house shape, and this is explained under our Mivneh heading. We're highlighting the word Ba'asra. Ba'asra means in a location, in a place. So on the side, under the Mivneh heading, we've written Minhagim Shonim, different practices, Beseder Bitzua Iska Ois, in the sequence in which deals are concluded, transactions are executed. Ma Kodem, what takes place first? Arichas Hashtar o Tashlum Aksofim? Is it the preparation of the deed, the document, the contract, or the payment of money? And this will make a big difference. We now go to the Gemara. Be'asra diavi zuzi v'hodar kasvi shtora, in places that the practice was first to pay. In other words, first in a sale of property, the money is given up front, and then a document is prepared. Well, kule alma lo pligi, everyone will agree. Everyone will agree. The motzi amalei, under circumstances like that, the borrower can say, you should have grabbed the money that I was paying for the sale and just claim that's the payback of the debt. Why is it that you continue to prepare a title of a bill of sale, indicating then, like I say, that the debt that you're claiming has already been paid up? So in that case, where the practice is to give the money, advance the money before the preparation of the shtar, everyone agrees that the lova has the upper hand. Ki pligi ba'asro de kasfi shtar v'hoder yavi zuzi. The machlokas between Admon and the Chachomim is in a place where the practice was first to write up the shtar and then to pay the cash. Admon savar iboya lei lemimsar moidah. Admon figures that if the mocher, or the lender has any chance, he should have issued a disclaimer. He should have told other people that, I'm going to sell this field now, and I'm going to get paid for it, and my whole purpose in doing this is it's not an indication that the debt that I am trying to claim has been paid up already, but I'm simply transferring to this borrower a parcel of land, and I'm getting paid for that parcel of land that will now enable me to seize that land back as a means of collecting my debt, call it as collateral for the debt that he still owes me. And Admon says that if he didn't issue this whole disclaimer, the fact remains that if the sale was concluded and it was paid for, it indicates that the payment was for the sale and that really there is no more debt. Rabbanon Savri, the Rabbanon who introduced the method or the scheme that we just finished describing, whereby the lender provides himself with a means of collateral, the Rabbanon say that is in fact the lender's strong claim. And as far as why didn't he issue the disclaimer, because chavro islay v'chavro de chavro islay, which, without translating it literally, it means that word gets around. Everyone has friends, and friends tell friends, and word will get to the borrower, and he won't go through with the sale, realizing that he's going to end up losing the land eventually because of the lender's continued claim. So you can't expect the lender to have issued this disclaimer that would have foiled his entire scheme. The Mishnah. Shnayim shotziu shtar choiv ze al ze. A attempts to collect with a bill of collection a debt from B, and B from A. Admon Omer, and let's just assume throughout this sugya that these two debts that each one is trying to claim from the other are the same amounts of money. The Gemara will deal with the circumstances. It's very hard to reveal right now what is really going on, but there's quite a bit of information revealed in the Gemara. Well, in the meantime, Admon Omer, Ilu Hoyisi Chayav L'cha, if I was indebted to you, Ketzad Ata Lova Mimeni, then how is it that you're borrowing money from me? In other words, if I was still indebted to you, the money that you would be taking from me wouldn't be a loan that you're taking from me. You're trying to recover your debt. So that if you're borrowing from me, it indicates that whatever I owed you was already paid up. Rabbanan say each one collects their debt as is. Note in Rashi the point that we made earlier. Rashi across from here says even if the amounts are equal, ein oimrim yakiv zeh milva shachaver b'shvil milva shilveu ela beisin yordan l'nichsei kol echad u'magvin l'shekenegdo es chovo. We don't say that each one withholds the money that he is chayav to the other, but rather Beisin descends upon the properties of these people and sells them off in order to see to it that these debts are paid. So far, it's still quite murky because the way we're explaining things, we're saying that A is trying to collect $100 from B, and B is trying to collect $100 from A, so that A, in trying to collect from B, will collect $100 from B, and then B, who is trying to collect from A will have to pay back the $100. Like, what have we gained? What's the purpose of all of this? To be continued. The Gemara. Itmar Shnayim Shotziv Shtar Choiv Zeh Al Zeh. It would appear to be the same case as the Mishnah. Rav Nachman Omar Zeh Goive V'Zeh Goive. The opinion of Rav Nachman seems to reflect the Chachamim. And Rav Sheshes Omar Hafuche Matarta Lomo Li. Elo Zeh Oimed B'Shelo V'Zeh Oimed B'Shelo. The approach Rav Sheshes takes is, what's the whole purpose in just exchanging the same amounts of money? Now the term Hafuche Matarta, Rashi explains the meaning of that phrase. It's an analogy. Imagine you're carrying two heavy items, one in your left hand and one in your right hand, and it's the same. Both items have the same weight, the same type of container. Does it make any sense that to switch the package from your right hand to your left hand and from your left hand to your right hand? It's the same amounts. It's not going to ease your burden at all. If it's a different story if one package weighs 10 pounds and the other weighs 5 pounds, so it's beneficial to you to switch from time to time to make things easier to carry. But where everything else is equal, why would someone do that? And hence, each one just keeps the money that they are that the other is claiming from them. As we go on, we'll continue using the double underline to highlight the expressions Kule Alma and Ki Pligi. Under what circumstances is there agreement, and under what circumstances is there disagreement? Let us point out ahead of time that when we speak about collecting debts, if the debtors don't have cash, so collections are made from land. Technically speaking, or I should say, in general, we usually speak about three grades of land, three types of land. Idis is the most desirable, Beinon is medium quality, and Ziburis, the poorest quality. It's also generally assumed that people would prefer to have, everything else being equal, a small amount of high quality land than a large amount of low quality land. We're not dealing with discrepancies in actual value that will be paid back, but we're dealing with different qualities of land that would be used to pay back. There's also a general list of, we'll say, a program of collection. That is, in cases of tort damage, so the victim is able to collect from Edis quality land, top quality land. When it comes to collecting debts, loans, those are collected from middle quality land. So far, when we speak about these three qualities of land, the simple approach simply says that there's an objective, let's say, regional standard of land. In any given region, there is what's known to be the best quality, the middle quality, and the lowest quality, and that's what we call, in the Gemara terms, you'll see the expression of shomin b'da'alma. Shomin means we make our assessment according to the general standard. There's another way of looking at things, and that has to do with a relative standard, where an individual has several qualities of land, where you can have a situation where his best quality of land would be the worst in terms of the general audience, the general public. But it just so happens that he has even poorer quality land that's worse than the worst, if you can say things like that. That's and in a case like that, this man's best quality land, though it's the equivalent of the poor quality land in general terms, but relative to himself, that's his best quality. That's his idis. So we're just throwing out these ideas as general points to be aware of as we go through the Gemara. So the Gemara continues. The Kulei Alma, Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes will both agree, idis v'idis, where the two parties claiming from each other both have only idis quality lands, or beinonus ubeinonus, ziburis v'ziburis. Vadai hafuche matarta hu. That's very clearly a case of hafuche matarta, which would mean there's no point in exchanging the same items from one to the other. The same items in the same quality lands from one to another. Ki pligi, when does the machlokas Rav Nachman Rav Sheshes arise? De'is lei lechad beinonus ulechad ziburis, where one of the parties has beinonus land and the other party has ziburis quality land. Rav Nachman Sovar. We should also point out, by the way, that the Gemara will appear in several stages, and that's what this. We didn't point out that this bow tie shape on the side of the Gemara, we have a nosei mivne heading. These are nisyonos, attempts lahasbir be'ezin mikra kayim machloikis bein Rav Nachman v'Rav Sheshes. Under what circumstances do Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes argue b'inyan shnayim shotziu shtar choiv zeh al zeh, with regard to the two that produce bills of collection, one against the other? So, as we said, this is stage one. You will notice later that there is the Gemara raises a difficulty with this analysis, which will bring us to stage two. So we say that the machlokas arises when one has beinonus quality land and the other has ziburis quality land. In other words, they're not on equal footing. Rav Nachman Sovar, Zeh Goive v'Zeh Goive. Rav Nachman is of the opinion, as he said before, that each one does collect. Once again, I know that sometimes we may sound repetitive, but there are certain points that are somewhat abstract or obscure. And you should just realize that both have debts of the same market or the same amount, the same objective monetary amount. Each one is trying to claim $100 from the other, for example. The payments are not going to be in cash terms, but rather in land collections. And we said one of the parties has medium quality land, the other one has poor quality land. According to Rav Nachman, in a case like this, there is a point in proceeding with collection. And this is predicated on Rav Nachman's position that land qualities are assessed according to subjective terms. That's b'shelo hein shomin. We'll explain that as we go through the Gemara. Procedurally, what will happen? Osi Baal Ziburis, the Govi Le Lebeinanis, the fellow who has a claim of $100 and currently owns Ziburis land, what he'll do is he'll collect $100 worth of the Beinanis land from the other fellow. To have a Gabe Idis, at that point, the Beinanis quality is for him, this Baal Ziburis, again, subjectively, or relatively speaking, it's idis, it's top quality. What did we say about people collecting debts? To what kind of land are they entitled? We could say it this way, in the negative. They're not entitled to top quality land. So what's going to happen now? The Osahu, the fellow who was, we call the original Beinanis owner, he's going to now come to collect Osahu V'shokil Ziburis. And he's going to then be taking the Ziburis, which is the less than top quality land, as his collection. So we don't have, you see that there's a point, there is what to be, we'll say there's profit here, profit in quality terms, not in terms of cash terms, but there's, in quality terms, there is what to be gained, certainly by the Baal Ziburis has what to gain in this situation. Because at the end of the day, he will be keeping the Beinanis, and the Beinanis original owner will be getting as his payment the Ziburis. The Rav Sheshes said this whole act is pointless because Rav Sheshes hafuche matarta lomali. That's what Rav Sheshes says. Why switch around equal things? Because Savar, his conclusion is based on the premise that b'shel kol adam hein shomin. And when we speak about idis quality and Beinanis quality, Ziburis quality, we speak about a general standard, not a relative standard. So that when debts are collected, they're collected from, as we mentioned earlier, from Beinanis quality land. And according to Rav Sheshes, Beinanis means in objective terms. Soif, the result is at the end, ki osa hahu, ki osi hahu, when the Beinanis guy comes to collect, after the Ziburis man collected the Beinanis man is now going to come to collect his debt. It's Beinanis denafshei koshokil. He's going to end up taking back his own Beinanis. So what was the point of having it given to the Ziburis man when at the end of the day, it'll be given to him and then he'll take it back? The Gemara asks, according to Rav Nachman, that said that there's a point to this, and we described how there is a point to it by having the Baal Ziburis collect the Beinanis. The Gemara asks, Rav Nachman, my chosis the osi Baal Ziburis bereisha. What is it that makes it such that the Baal Ziburis collects at first? Lesi Baal Beinanis bereisha v'ligvi Ziburis. Let the Baal Beinanis, the Beinanis owner, come to collect first, and he'll collect the Ziburis. V'lahader v'ligvi nihalei. And then when the Baal Ziburis comes to collect, once again, he's not entitled to the top quality, and things are, according to Rav Nachman, looked at in relative terms. So what is going to happen? The Baal Ziburis is going to end up taking back the Ziburis that he had just paid. That's v'lahader v'ligvi nihalei. And then after the Baal Beinanis initially collected the Ziburis, when the other fellow comes to collect, he'll be taking back the Ziburis. And is that not a case of hafuche matarta? The Gemara says, well, lo tzricha, the case concerning which Rav Nachman does argue is the kodim tav'ei, where the Baal Ziburis, in fact, was the first one to place his claim. The Gemara asks, so what? He's the first one to place his claim. Ki also lemikvi, when it comes to the actual collections, bahadi hadodi kasu, they're going to be coming together. for the actual collections, and you're back to square one. It's even if the Baal Ziburis had put the claim in first, they're going to be coming together so that the Baal Beinanis will end up collecting the Ziburis according to Rav Nachman, and I'm paying back the Ziburis. Elo lo tzricha, rather the machlokes Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes is necessary to be taught. The is lei lechad ibis ubeinanis, the is lei lechad ziburis. As you can see, this is a new setup. With the markings, you can easily contrast with the first case, where in the previous setup we had one had beininus, the other had ziburis. In this case, one has edis and beininus, and the other one has ziburis. More Sovar, Rav Nachman holds Bisheloi Hein Shomin. Assessment is made in terms of edis beininus ziburis is made on a relative basis. More Sovar Bishel Kol Odom Hein Shomin. And Rav Sheshes says that the standard is the objective regional standard. And therefore, since it's an objective regional standard, it's going to be a case of hafuche matarta. Now, as far as Rav Nachman is concerned, there is what to be gained. And in order to appreciate this, we take a look at the Rashi. You'll notice across from here, there's a starred Rashi, more sover b'shalayin shamin. V'lav hafuche matarta, it's not a case of exchanging equal things. The mimon of shachicha revacha lebal ziburis. Either way you look at things, the Baal Ziburis has what to gain. Di'i chavrei kodim bereisha v'gavi. If the fellow that has idis and ziburis idis and beinanis, effectively collects first, and he'll be collecting then the ziburis. Ika gabe idis beininus ziburis. There will now be three qualities of lands by that fellow. Umagvi lahech, and then the original Baal Ziburis will get beinonis, so he has what to gain. The iu kodim gavi, if the Baal Ziburis collects first, and what will he collect? Again, because you're dealing, he won't collect the idis, he'll collect the beinonis. So now you'll have the Baal HaZiburis holding Ziburis and beinonis. Beinones havyo gabe, since we're dealing with Rav Nachman who says things are evaluated subjectively, the beinones that this fellow is holding on to right now is idis, umagvi l'chabvei ziburis, and he will then give to the other fellow the ziburis. So the original Baal Ziburis, at the end of the day, either way you look at things, is going to end up with beinonis. So there's what to be gained. We continue in the Gemara. Tanan v'chachomim oimrim ze goyve v'ze goyve. We have a Tanaic source, the opinion of the Chachomim, that say that each one does a collection. Well, that's not like Rav Sheshes. Tirgamo Rav Nachman aliba Rav Sheshes. Here we have something that's whenever you see this, it's quite dramatic, and that is that you have it's called, I refer to as the honesty of the Talmud. And here you have two opposite, or two arguers, two opponents, Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes, and you would think that if you have a Tanaic source that just knocks out your opponent, Rav Nachman would be very happy that Rav Sheshes' point of view is being refuted by the Mishnah. However, the Talmud goes above that. It's interested in honesty, in torah emes. And Rav Nachman is figuring like this, that if my opponent is going to be knocked out, it better be with something that you can't wriggle out of. Rav Nachman points out that this isn't a solid question on Rav Sheshes. Tirgama Rav Nachman Ali Rav Sheshes. Rav Nachman explains the Mishnah in such a way that it works out according to, or for the benefit of Rav Sheshes. Kegoin Shelova zeh li'eser v'zeh l'chomesh. Now we have a new marking, and there's a new scheme that develops as you go through the next lines of Gemara. Take a look first at our topic heading, at the mivneh, that is, the structural note. You'll see that these are nisyonos, the house marking, nisyonos lahasbir, Ha dikotani v'chachamim zeh goyve v'zeh goyve. We're going to be explaining the chachamim of the Mishnah, and then we will also have another geometric form, a volcano shape, and these indicate shlavim. These are stages. Lahavin is Berosh Rav Nachman B'Moker Hanal. We're going to first try to explain what Rav Nachman just said. So we're now interested in understanding the case of the Mishnah that of the Chachamim, the Shitas Chachamim, Zeh Goyve, and not have that as a refutation of Rav Sheshes. So Rav Nachman explained the Mishnah is talking about a case of one loan is a 10-year loan and the other is a 5-year loan. Hey Chidomi, I Leimo Rishon Lieser V'Sheni L'Chomesh, that Reuven loaned Shimon $100 to be paid back at the end of 10 years. And let's say a year later, Shimon is interested in taking a loan. I should say that Reuven is interested in taking a loan for 5 years. That's V'Sheni L'Chomesh. Behal Leimo Admon, would Admon say under those circumstances that one would be able to claim Ilu Hoyisi Chayev L'cha Ketzar Ata Loiva Mimeni? If I was really indebted to you, so then how is it that you are borrowing from me? Well, that's not a claim. Ha lo mota zimne. Very simply, the time hasn't arrived. If we'll just go over this case again. You have Reuven loaned Shimon a debt for 10 years. That means that Reuven can't collect the debt until 10 years passes. I don't know, after a year later, Reuven needs money, so he might very well need to take a loan from Shimon. And Shimon won't be able to say, if I really owed you money, so what are you borrowing from me? It's very simple. He's borrowing because Reuven is borrowing because he's not going to see his $100 for another 10 years. Ella, rather, Rishon L'Chomesh V'Sheni L'Eser. The first one's loan is a loan that was extended for 5 years, and the second loan was a loan for 10 years. Hey Fidomi, but again, what are the circumstances? I de moto zimne, if the 5 years passed, so that Reuven loaned Shimon $100 for 5 years, and 5 years passed. And then we see Reuven borrowing from Shimon. Well, if the 5 years have already passed, my time of the Rabbanon, why do the Rabbanon say that that star is a good star? That the second star is a good star. Let us just go over that case again. Reuven has a star of indicating he loaned Shimon money for 5 years. He loaned him $100, and Shimon has a bill of collection to collect from Reuven. If it is true that the 5 years have passed, then how is it that Reuven is attempting to collect a loan from Shimon when you see this very Reuven borrowing money from Shimon? Borrowing $100. Why does he need to borrow the $100 if the 5 years have passed? He could collect the money from Shimon as a debt owed to him. Therefore, if Shimon is showing us a document that Reuven borrowed the $100, it must be that Reuven's claim of $100 is a forgery. So why would the Chachomim machshir the bill of collection of the supposed first lender? We continue in the Gemara, V'i delo moto zimnei, and if the 5 years have not passed, holo moto zimnei, so the chance for Reuven to collect his 5-year loan from Shimon hasn't yet arrived, and that Reuven happens to need money, and the 5 years haven't lapsed yet. Well, my time of the Admon, then what would be the basis of explaining Admon, who does not, or I should say, the position taken by Admon that we saw in the name of Rav Sheshes of Hafulchei Matarta. Just for the sake of pinpoint accuracy, I don't think there was any need for me to make reference to Rav Sheshes, because right now we're analyzing the Mishnah. We had presented the Shitas Chachomim as a problem for Rav Sheshes. So if we're going to explain the Chachomim with this approach that the first bill of collection was 5 years and the second bill of collection was for 10 years, whatever explanation we give for the Chachomim, we're going to have to see if that makes sense then in light of what Admon said. Therefore, if we're going to explain the Chachomim saying Zeh Gova v'Zeh Goive as a function of the first Malve's 5-year loan not having become due yet, so why would Admon disagree with the Chachomim? Lo Sricha. It is necessary to be taught. In other words, this machlokes is necessary under the following circumstances. The Osa Behahu Yoma de Mishlam Chomesh. The 5-year loan is going to be due tomorrow, so that the first Malveh is coming on the last day, knowing that the next day he would be able to collect. And yet, on this last day of the 5 years, he comes to borrow money from the very man that tomorrow he's going to be able to collect that sum of money. More sovar ovid inish de Yosef liyome. The Chachomim are of the opinion that people will borrow money even if it's for 1 day. So that can happen where there's some kind of very good deal, a great purchase, you don't have any cash, you're only going to get your cash tomorrow, and he doesn't want to pass up on the fleeting deal, so he'll borrow the $100 from the very man that tomorrow he's going to collect the $100, but he'll borrow from him today, the last day of the 5 years, and it'll be a 10-year loan. That's the Chachomim. That's More Sovar Ovid Inish Di Yosef Liome. More Sovar Admon would hold Lo Ovid Inish Di Yosef Liome. Now, I just want to explain again, structurally speaking, all of this is Rav Nachman's presentation of the Mishnah on behalf of Rav Sheshes, and this is how the Mishnah would appear in explaining the machlokes Chachomim and Admon. So the Chachomim would take the position that a person would borrow for 1 day, meaning that even though the next day he'll get this amount of cash by collecting the loan that he had extended 5 years previously, but he needs the money today. He can't wait till tomorrow. And Admon will say people won't do that. Lo ovid inish di Yosef liome. People won't do that. And therefore, if you see the Malve Rishon borrowing from the second guy, that it would indicate that the claim of the second guy is a strong claim, and which stated that if you had a claim against me, so what are you borrowing from me? V'Rami bar Chama Omar. This is a new house marking, so that indicates to us as a new another approach in explaining the Shitas Chachamim in the Mishnah. Hocha b'yasmi askinon. Here we're talking about a case of orphans, and they don't have any karka. They didn't inherit karka from their fathers. They have only portables. And the rule says as follows: the Yasmi Migve Gavi, Yisoimim have the power to collect the loans their father had extended. However, Agvuye Lo Magvinon Minaihu. However, they are not collected from. But what would be collected from them? Portables. And there's a rule that portables of Yisoimim are not bound in the payment of their father's debts. So that if you want to understand the Chachamim, say what's the purpose in the collection? The purpose is because the Yisoimim in this case, there was one of we'll say the first lender had died, and it's his orphans that are coming to collect. So they'll be able to collect, but they won't be collected from. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi that we're looking at is the fourth wide line under the Gemara text, toward the end of the line. B'yasmi askinon, shemeis echad mehen. One of the two lenders that were featured in the Mishnah had died. Vayisoimim boim v'toivim, and his heirs are coming to collect. Ve'en lahem karka shekenegdom goy v'shtaro mehen. These Yisoimim don't have any karka that would have enabled the other collector, the other lender, to collect the land. They simply don't have that. Delo mishtabne talti asmil achov. So now we go back to the Gemara text. The Gemara asks, how can Rami Bar Chama say that the Shitas Chachamim is when they say Zeh Goyva v'Zeh Goyva is a reference to this situation, which stated that the Yisoimim will collect, but they won't be collected from. It says in the Mishnah that each lender will collect from the other guy. So the Gemara answers on behalf of Rami Bar Chama, Zeh Goyva v'Zeh Roi Ligvois v'Ein Lo. What it meant is, what the Mishnah means is that one will actually collect, and the other one was a candidate to be collected from, but there is no collection that's going to be made from him in actuality. Rava is not happy with this explanation. Two objections. Number one, first, you can't deny the simple meaning of the text. It says that each one will collect, not what Rami Bar Chama tried to explain, that the second guy is fit to be collected, fit to collect but won't be able to. And furthermore, ligvinu ara liyasmi, let the Yisoimim in fact collect the land. V'lehader v'ligvinu minayu kiderav Nachman, and then after the Yisoimim collect the land as payment to the debt owed to their father, that very land will then be transferred back to the other fellow who has a claim against their father, based on Rav Nachman's teaching. The Yom Rav Nachman Omar Rabba Bar Avua Yisoimim Shigovu Karka B'Chayvas Avihem B'Achov Chozer V'Govo Somehen. Someone that collected property because of their a debt owed to their father, that very land can then be collected by the one who has a claim against their father. So if that's the case, so then Kashya, why then would you bother saying Zegova Zegova when in effect it would be a case of Hafuche Matarta? So this is so-called Kashya. This is left as a difficult point in Rami Bar Chama's explanation of the Mishnah. A new suggestion for explaining the Chachamim in the Mishnah, Velukma, Te'is Lehu, Liyasmi Ziburis, Ve'is Le, Ledidei, Idis Ubeininis. Very similar to an approach we saw earlier. The Yisomim, who are coming to collect on behalf of the father, they have land, but all the land they have is Ziburis quality land. And the other fellow, with his claim, happens to possess Idis and Beininis. The Azli Yasmi, Govu Beininis, the Yisomim will come and collect the Beininis quality land, Umagvi Le Ziburis, and then when the original lender, the name is the fellow that remained alive, when he comes to collect his debt, all he'll be able to collect is the Ziburis. The Inami B'Shalkol Adam Hein Shaman, because it is now, even if you say that land is evaluated in objective terms, and if you were to say that, so now the Yisomim, after collecting the Beininis, they now have, in addition to the Ziburis, they have Beininis. So you would say that they collected Beininis and they're now giving back Beininis. That's not so, because there's a special law concerning Yisomim. Ha ein nifroyin mi nichse Yisomim ela miziburis. The rule says that you cannot collect from Yisomim when you collect debts that their father owed. You collect only from Ziburis quality land. So that, why couldn't you set up and explain the Chachomim who say Zeh Goyve v'Zeh Goyve with the Yisomim circumstance, like Rami Bar Chama had suggested? And that's why we're calling this Roman numeral number 2. It's the second Yisomim explanation. And set it up like this, and there would be value in each side collecting. The Gemara says, Hani Mili, the rule of Ein Nifroim Nichsi Yisomim El Mizurus, that is true, Hecha Delo Tofis. That's where you're dealing with land that the original fellow had not been in possession of. Aval Hecha de Tofas. Put it this way: if the court has to do the distribution, so then it wouldn't. Then there would be value in this, in the Yisomim collecting the Beininis, and the other party coming to collect from the Yisomim, he'll be entitled only to Ziburis. That's where there was no Tofas, where he didn't act on his own, where Basin was going to make the payments, but where someone grabs it, his grabbing is effective. That's Hecha de Tofas, and therefore the fellow from whom the Beininis was collected, if he grabs back possession of the Beininis, even though it's from Yisomim, it stands. His collection stands. Before we move on to the Mishnah, I want to correct a possible mistake that we may have made at the beginning of this Gemara, and that was mentioning back on the second to last narrow line of the Gemara where Rav Sheshis appeared. I might have paralleled Rav Sheshis to Admon in the Mishnah. That would be a mistake. Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshis at the opening of the Gemara were simply arguing about a case which sounded like the opening of the Mishnah, but they have their own machlokes between themselves regarding Shnayim Shotzi Shtarchov Zal Zeh, where Rav Nachman said a collection is made one to the other, and Rav Sheshis said Hafuche Matarta, and we had explained that in the case, in terms of the Gemara, we had explained that with regard to the issue of a 5-year loan coming due on the next day, would a lender like that, who has the ability to collect his loan tomorrow would he borrow money the day before? Then it was the last day of that particular loan. So regarding that, we established the machlokes Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes, and then we had to, after then presenting a question on Shitas Rav Sheshes from the Mishnah, we then had to explain the machlokes Tanoim through the eyes of how Rav Sheshes would understand it, and that's what you see in terms of all of these house markings, were attempts to set up the explanation of the Mishnah through the eyes of Rav Sheshes. But as far as the machlokes Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes is concerned, just to repeat and with greater accuracy, the Gemara's final explanation in explaining their machlokes, we had said that one of the loan collectors had idis and beininus, and the other loan collector had ziburis. And is there a point in having the collection take place? Well, according to Rav Nachman, yes, there is, because of his opinion that land assessment is made in subjective terms, and Rav Sheshes said no point in doing so. It's hafuche matarta, because land assessment is made in general terms, not in subjective terms. Before we continue with the new Mishnah, we glance at the side where we have a topic heading, the nosei. Hanosei isha be'eretz Yisrael, someone who marries a woman in the land of Israel, eino yochol lechufa lavor me eretz le'eretz. One cannot force his wife to go from one land region within Eretz Yisrael to another land region. Kagon miYehuda leGolio. The Mishnah itself mentions that there are 3 land regions within Israel. For some, it may be easier to think of 3 provinces or 3 states within the land of Israel. And as an example, one cannot force his wife to go from Yehuda to Golio. But a change of location within one province, that he can force her, provided it's simply a maintenance of the same circumstances, like from an ear to an ear. An ear is a medium-sized municipality. Klomar shemokum hasheni doime lemokum harishon, where the second location, the point of relocation, is similar to the first point. V'lo me'ir lekrach, but not to force her, let us say, to go from a medium-sized city to a metropolis. Now, the Mishnah. Sholosh harotzos lenisuin. There are 3 land regions which have ramifications for marriage, as we explained in our introduction. Yehuda ve'Hayarden ve'Hagolio. Ein motziin me'ir le'ir mikrach lekrach. We don't force movement or change of location from one land region to another. So that when it says here, Ein motziin me'ir le'ir, this could be tricky. That's why we have to emphasize when you're dealing from an ear in one land region to an ear in another land region, or mikrach lekrach, or from one metropolis in one land region to a metropolis in another land region. Avo ba'oisa oretz, but within the same province, motziin me'ir le'ir umikrach lekrach. You can force her to move from one medium-sized city to another within that particular province, or from one metropolis to another. Avol, we continue at the top of Omid Beis. Avol lo me'ir lekrach v'lo mikrach le'ir. The Gemara will explain this in detail. Motziin minevei hara lenevei hayofeh. One can force movement from a bad neighborhood to a good neighborhood. Avolo minevei hayofeh lenevei hara. But from a nice neighborhood to a bad neighborhood, not so. Rab Shimon Gamliel Omer, Af lo minavei ra'ah l'navei yafeh. He says that you can't force your wife to move from a bad neighborhood to a good neighborhood. B'nei shehanavei hayafeh bodek. Rashi at the top. Before maybe we read the Rashi, just by way of illustration, speak about a Nevei HaYofeh as being a location, a neighborhood with a very densely built houses, very little by way of gardens and parks and airspace. That would be a Nevei Hara. Nevei HaYofeh would be the opposite. So Reb Shimon Gamliel says to go from the squalid type location to an airy, roomy neighborhood, that also you cannot force it because it's bodek. Rashi says at the top, Shanavei Yafa bodek es haguf. Bodek literally means checks out, but it means it subjects the body to a strain. It checks out, it puts a strain. In fact, we'll see later in the Gemara this concept of any change from routine puts a strain on the person. The Gemara, Bishlama mikrach le'ir. I understand the idea of not being allowed to force from going from a large metropolis where all of your needs are supplied to an ear where things are less accessible. The bekrach shchichi komili, in a large city, all of one's needs are easily accessed, and be'ir lo shchichi komili, and in a medium-sized location, so you don't have all of your amenities available. So that's understandable. That which we saw. Lo mikrach le'ir. However, elo mi'ir lekrach ma'itaima, from a medium-sized location to a metropolis, why can't that be forced? Isn't that moving up in standard? So the Gemara says, Misayele the Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Our Mishnah, in effect, supports Rav Yossi's teaching. From where do we know that dwelling in large cities is strenuous? It's as we say, it's strenuous. It's not something that's necessarily better. Shenemar, the pasuk says, "Vayevorchu am l'chol anoshim hamisnadvim losheves b'Yerushalayim." The nation praised those people who volunteered to. We'll say volunteer with a sense of self-sacrifice to dwell in Jerusalem. Jerusalem being an example of a krach, of a large city, and as you can see, it requires an element of altruism and self-sacrifice to live in a place like that. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, Shanavei Hayofe Bodek. My Bodek. What do you mean by that? By that term? So in order to appreciate the term, we say Kiddush Shmuel, like in accordance with Shmuel's teaching. The Amar Shmuel, Shinui Veses Tchilas Choli Me'ayim. A change in routine. Veses is that something that is characterized by constancy and regularity. So a change in regularity is the beginning of stomach ailments. And we emphasize here, when he speaks about a shinui, and Rashi adds, even l'toiva, even if it's better, for the better. And the Gemara continues, Kosuv b'sefer ben Sira. And here there's a very tricky situation. The Gemara quotes a body of literature called Sefer Ben Sira, the Book of Ben Sira. There is quite a bit of discussion concerning who was Ben Sira, at what time did he live. But I can tell you, just from memory, I seem to recall that there is an opinion that he might have even been the son of Yirmiyahu HaNavi. And if that be the case, this Ben Sira work is an ancient work dating back to the time of the prophets. However, it was not canonized. It wasn't included in the 24 holy books of the Tanakh. Namely, it does not have divine sanctity to it. It's not a piece of work that was divinely inspired. There are words of wisdom in the book of Ben Sira, witnessed by the fact that the Gemara cites it from time to time, but it's not of a divine origin. So the Gemara says that it says in Sefer Ben Sira, and then it goes on and quotes a pasuk from Mishlei. Mishlei is from the books of the Tanakh. It's from the sanctified or the canonized holy writings. So what do you mean it says that in Sefer Ben Sira? So if you take note of our markings, the quote from Ben Sira is really that which follows the brackets. So that what in effect happens here is that Ben Sira makes a point based on, it actually continues, he picks up from a pasuk in Mishlei, and he adds that which follows after the brackets. So that technically speaking, the Gemara says, Kosav b'sefer Ben Sira, you skip the brackets, af leilos. Even the night times, and he goes on with some more information. That's from Ben Sira. But in the meantime, as we read the Gemara straight through with the bracketed section, you have to realize that only after the brackets do you have the actual quote from Ben Sira. So it goes as follows. Shmuel said that Shinui Vesas Tchilas Choli, and Shmuel's point is, even if it's whatever change in regularity, even if it's going up in quality, it still can bring on indigestion and stomach ailments. Kosuv b'sefer Ben Sira, kol yemei oni ro'im. This is a pasuk from Mishlei, as we emphasized, and it says, translated as, all the days of the poor man are with suffering. The Gemara asks, aren't there the days of Shabbos and holidays when he might be suffering and suffer limitation during the week, but when it comes to Shabbos, even the poor man sets up a nice meal, an enjoyable feast on Shabbos and certainly on Yom Tov. So why would that be included in the Yemei Yoni Royim? What's ra? What's negative about that? The more answers, Kiddush Shmuel. Diomar Shmuel, Shinui Veses Tchilas Choli Me'ayim. That any change, even if it's a change for the better, if you were used to eating some type of very, very basic type of food substance during the week, maybe a bread with some olives or something very basic, and then comes Shabbos, and you have even the poor man, he has a first course, a second course, maybe a third course, and that's a big change for him. It's a strain on the system, so that he'll pay for that, so to speak, in the course of the day, or maybe right afterwards. But that's the beginning of that's Tchilas Chole Me'ayim, and hence even Shabbos and Yom Tov for the poor man is going to be considered ra. So Ben Sira Omer Af Leilos, the pasuk spoke about daytime. Ben Sira says the nighttime also. And further descriptions of the Yemei Oni Royim brought to you by Ben Sira. It says there, B'shval Gagim Gago, cities that are not built on totally flat terrain, but that are built on, let's say, hillsides. The poor man's house will be lowest. That shval means lower or lowest. His roof is lower than everyone else's roof, so that all the water and runoff and drainage that flows from on top runs down onto him. So if anyone's going to be subjected to, let's say, to flooding or to debris in their homes, it's the poor man. Uvmrom Harim Karmo, and his vineyard, his fields are, when you're dealing again with let's say a hilly environment, his fields and vineyards are going to be on the top of mountains. And now this is explained. These 2 points are explained. Mimatar Gagim Legago, the runoff, the drainage from people's roofs are going to land on his. Umei Afar Karmo Likramim, and all the erosion from fields is going to experience the erosions. Those locations which are higher up are more subject to wind and erosion. So his soil is then blown into other people's fields, leaving his vineyards topsoil bare. Rashi points out, in addition to what I mentioned, topsoil, so Rashi speaks about the fertilizer that he used to fertilize his fields, so all of that will be blown away. Before we continue with the next Mishnah, we glance at the side. We have a topic heading. Point number 1, Hakol Ma'alin Le'eretz Yisrael. In the spirit of the previous Mishnah, the idea of forcing a spouse to move to a different location, the Mishnah here tells us that anyone can force the other one. With a husband and wife, we'll see more people that are included, but in general, husband, wife, husband, can force one another to go from outside of Israel to the land of Israel. And another point that will be discussed has to do with Tashlum HaKsuba, the fi Mois Eretz Yisrael or Mois Kaputka. The Ksuba payment, when it needs to be paid, is it in accordance with the Eretz Yisrael coinage or in accordance with the Kaputya coinage? Kaputya being another country whose coinage was more valuable, was weightier than the coinage of Eretz Yisrael. So which coinage is used to pay the Ksuba payment? The Mishnah, Hakol Malin le'Eretz Yisrael v'ein Hakol Motziin. Everyone can force the other one to go to Eretz Yisrael, but not the opposite. Hakol Malin Yerushalayim v'ein Hakol Motziin. Likewise, with regard to going from a location outside of Jerusalem to Jerusalem, everyone can force that, but not to leave Jerusalem. Echad ho anoshim ve'echad hanoshim, whether it be the men or the women. Nosa isha b'Eretz Yisrael, and here we have a double underline marking, and on the side of the Gemara, you'll notice under the Mivneh heading, Roman numeral number 1 introduces this double underline, which indicates Nosa b'Eretz Yisrael, the initial marriage, where they got married was in the land of Israel. And under Roman numeral number 2, you see another type of double underlining, highlighting Nosa b'Kaputya, where the marriage took place in Kaputya. So the Mishnah continues, Nosa isha b'Eretz Yisrael, the girsha b'Eretz Yisrael. If the initial marriage was in Israel and the divorce took place in, and the divorce necessitates a ksuba payment, so no saying law, mimos Eretz Yisrael, the ksuba will be paid in terms of Eretz Yisrael coinage. Nosa isha b'Eretz Yisrael v'girsha b'Kaputya, where the initial marriage was in Israel but the divorce was in Kaputya, no saying law, mimos Eretz Yisrael. The payment would be made based on the Eretz Yisrael coinage. Nosa isha b'Kaputya v'girsha b'Eretz Yisrael, where the initial marriage took place in Kaputya and the divorce in Israel, no saying law, mimois Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, no saying law, mimois Kaputya. On this point, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees. Where the initial marriage took place in Kaputya, you must pay with the higher standard, the more valuable coin standard. Nosa isha b'Kaputya v'girsha b'Kaputya, no saying law, mimos Kaputya. As we turn to the Gemara, we encounter a new marking. We have a diamond, and on the side, under the Nosei Mivneh heading, we feature the word Hakol, and the Gemara will ask, La'asuye mai. When you see, oftentimes, the expression of Kol or Hakol, it's an expression that's coming to include something that may not have been stated explicitly in the Mishnah. So what is that coming to include? Hakol Bereisha, which said Hakol Malin L'Eretz Yisrael, Ve'ein Hakol Motziin. And then we have Hakol in the B'Seifa, Hakol Malin Yerushalayim. So now we turn to the Gemara. Hakol Malin, La'asuye mai. Who does that come to include? That everyone goes up to Eretz Yisrael. So Lasuyei Avodim. It comes to include the case of slaves. And slaves here mean Eved Ivri. And Rashi explains that if a person had an Eved Ivri, that's a Jewish worker that's bound to work for him, so this Eved, this Jewish Eved, has to follow him even against his will. Even if he doesn't want to go, he has to go. The Gemara continues, according to those who have in their Mishnah a version that we don't have in our Mishnah, but that state avodim explicitly, so then what does the Hakol at the beginning of the Mishnah going to include? As we mentioned before, we include that which is not stated explicitly. So what's there to include? Answer, Lasuyei minavei hayofe linavei hara'ah. The Mishnah that says that one can force others to go to Israel, that means even if one is leaving a luxurious neighborhood outside of Israel to a squalid neighborhood in Eretz Yisrael. V'ein hakol motziin lasuyei, that part of the Mishnah, what does the hakol come to include? Answer, lasuyei eved sheborach mechutza la'aretz. This includes a case of a slave that had run from outside of Israel to Israel. The Amrinon lay, we tell the master, Zavne hacha vazil. Your only option is to sell him in Israel and go. Mishum yeshivas Eretz Yisrael, because of the concern of having the land of Israel inhabited and settled, we don't want to have people removed from Eretz Yisrael. Hakol Malin Yushalayim. Lasuyei Mai, what does that come to include? Lasuyei Minavei Hayofe Linavei Hara. To include a forced movement from a bad neighborhood, a squalid neighborhood. Again, let me correct myself. To include movement from a luxurious neighborhood outside of Jerusalem to a squalid neighborhood within Yerushalayim. V'ein hakol motziin la'asuyei mai. What does the hakol word in this part of the Mishnah come to include? La'asuyei afilu minavei hara linavei hayofe. Even if, let's say, someone found a luxurious neighborhood outside of Jerusalem and they currently live in a squalid Jerusalem neighborhood, so even that one cannot force, namely force movement from a squalid neighborhood in Yerushalayim to a luxurious neighborhood but outside of Yerushalayim. V'aidi detana reisha ein motziin. Since the reisha used the expression of ein motziin, means ein motziin from Eretz Yisrael, Tana Seifa Nami Ein Motziin. The Seifa also uses the expression of Ein Motziin with regard to Yerushalayim. Now let us take a look at the Rashi on that. The ID de Tana, the Ilu Mishum Minavei Hara Linavei Hayafe. The idea of moving from a bad neighborhood in Yerushalayim to a good neighborhood outside. Lo itzrich. I don't need the Mishnah to tell me that. It's true the Gemara said that, but the point is I don't really need that to be said. Kevon de Ashminin, since we were told Demalin minavei hayofe linavei hara, we were told already that you can force movement from a luxurious neighborhood outside of Yerushalayim to a squalid neighborhood in Yerushalayim. Kol shekain dein motziin. So all the more so, we're not going to force afilu min hara liyafa, even if it happens to be from a bad in Yerushalayim to a good neighborhood outside Yerushalayim. In other words, where there's a change in status or change in situation, and the change is to the bad. Where you're currently in the bad, certainly you're not going to think that you're going to be allowed to force to go from a ra in Yerushalayim to a nice one outside Yerushalayim. So that's why the Gemara says here that the fact that it was taught was only by the way, in other words, for structural style balance in the Mishnah. As we go on, we have another structural note to note, and that's on the side of the Gemara. You can see Roman numerals 1 and 2. The one highlights la'alos, to go up, and the Roman number 2 deals with lotseis, to leave. And in each case, you have the husband putting a claim in and the wife putting a claim in. When the husband is the speaker, so we have a triangle with the point up, and when the woman, the wife, is the speaker, you see the inverted triangle. And this represents a vikuach bein b'nei hazug be'inyan aliyah v'yetziah, an argument that develops between the husband and wife regarding either going to or leaving. That will become clear as we see the examples. Tanu Rabbanan, hu omer la'alois, vi omer shelo la'alos. The husband wants to go from, let's say, outside of Israel to the land of Israel, or from outside Jerusalem to Jerusalem. Vi omer shelo la'alos, and she says, I don't want to go. Chayfeno so la'alos, we force her to go. V'im lavin, if she remains obstinate, so teitzei below ksuba, she can be divorced and not receive the ksuba. She loses on the ksuba. That goes to show how serious this matter is, how pressing it is to go to the land of Israel, how big a mitzvah it is. It's such a big mitzvah that will even compromise on the woman receiving the ksuba. And by this point in the Masechta, I'm sure everyone realizes how important it is that women are provided with a ksuba. But when it comes to a choice of Eretz Yisrael versus non-Eretz Yisrael, so the Eretz Yisrael consideration is very, very strong. It's also noteworthy that these halachas you will find are quoted in the Sifrei Halacha. You can see this in the Rambam, and you can see this in the Shulchan Aruch as well. The Gemara goes on, he omeres lalos v'omer shelo lalos. Now she's the one that wants to go and he doesn't. Kofen oisoi lalos will tell the man, you have to go. V'im lavin, if he refuses, so then yotzi v'yiteng ksuba, so let him divorce his wife and he'll have to pay the ksuba. It's interesting to note that there's two bonds that are alluded to here. There's the bond between husband and wife, and there's the bond between the Jew and the Holy Land of Israel, which, as I indicated before, might very well have ramifications to this very day. It's not necessarily a Gemara that's dealing with a story of once upon a time in history. But that's already a discussion that's a little bit beyond the purview of the Gemara markings, Daf Yomi shiur. But what we're trying to make a point is, at least on the textual level, you see the centrality of Israel, that even though we put so much emphasis and value on the maintenance of a married couple, the responsibility of husband to wife and wife to husband, and hopefully the love between the two. But when it comes to the Jew and the land of Israel, if push comes to pull, the halacha and hence God's word, it places greater emphasis on the Jew being in his homeland, in the land of Israel, where the Jewish people belong. We continue. He omeres lotseis vu omer shelo lotseis. She wants to leave Eretz Yisrael and he doesn't. Kofen oisa shelo lotseis. We tell her, you've got to stay. And if she refuses, teitzei below ksuba, she will be divorced and not receive her ksuba. Hu omer lotseis v'hi omeres shelo lotseis. He wants to leave Israel and she does not. Kofen oisa shelo lotseis. We force him not to leave, and if he still insists, yotzi, v'yiteng ksubos, let him divorce the wife that wants to stay in Eretz Yisrael and pay the ksuba. Noso isha v'chulei. Here we're dealing with the section of the Mishnah that dealt with the monies that are used to pay the ksuba. Ha gufa kashya. In looking at the Mishnah and its various sections, we end up with something that appears to be self-contradictory. Katani, it said in the Reisha, Nosa Isha, Beretz Yisrael, V'girsha B'kaputka, Noisen La Mimos, Eretz Yisrael, where the marriage took place in Israel and the divorce, which is associated with the need for paying the ksuba, took place in Kaputya. She receives the lesser quality money, the Eretz Yisrael currency. Alma, Basar Shibudo Azlina. So we see that in order to determine, if you just had the ratio, just this section, this first part of the Mishnah, you would conclude that money payments are determined by the shibuda. That means, for our purposes, the place of marriage, where the initial obligation set in, the point of marriage. That's when the initial responsibility and obligation to pay a ksuba sets in. So, from the Reisha, we would go according to the place of marriage. Ema Seifa. Continue reading the Mishnah, and it says, Nasa Isha B'Kaputya V'Girsha Beretz Yisrael, where the marriage took place in Kaputya and the divorce in Israel. Nosi Lo Mimos Eretz Yisrael. Here you see payment from using the Eretz Yisrael standard, the cheaper, the lesser quality currency. Well, if you have just the Seifa, then you would conclude Alma Basagavaina Azlinan. The method of determining what currency is paid is the time of collection, not initial obligation, but time of actual collection, the time of divorce. So that's a contradiction. Is it the shibuda that determines, or is it the gavaina that determines? Omar Rabba Mikule Ksuba Shanu Khan. The Mishnah is in accordance with that school of thought that says that ksuba payments, since the husband has to pay out of his pocket, the husband is granted a leniency. We are lenient with regard to ksuba payments. Kosavar ksuba d'Rabbanan. This is accepting the position. This assumes the position that ksuba is something that's only rabbinic in nature. We would say it's only a rabbinic obligation as opposed to a doraisa, Torah level obligation. And being that it's rabbinic, so we can apply leniency wherever they want to apply it. Namely, what we're saying is that no official standard is set determining how the money is to be paid on a consistent basis. Therefore, whatever comes out to be more lenient for the husband to pay, he is to benefit from that. Now, regarding that case where the marriage took place in Eretz Yisrael and the divorce, let me correct myself, where the marriage took place in Kaputya and the divorce took place outside of Kaputya, took place in Eretz Yisrael, Reb Shmuel says in that case she gets the higher standard. Kosovar Ksuba Deoraisa. Reb Shmuel is of the opinion that the basis of Ksuba is from the Torah. Since it's from the Torah, it takes on the characteristic of all debts, all forms of owing money. Person borrows money, so he is now indebted. What is the rule in general with regard to debts that are incurred? You go according to the initial, what's called the shibuda, the initial point of obligation. And hence, Reb Shmuel concludes that where the marriage took place in Kaputya, even though the divorce took place in Eretz Yisrael, she's entitled to the higher currency because the shibuda there was in Kaputya. That's where the obligation was established. Tonu Rabbanan, Hamotzi Shtar Choiv al Chavero. A person produces a bill of collection to collect money from his friend. Kosuv bo Bovel. It says that the loan took place in Bovel. the loan is paid back with the Bovel currency. Kesubos Eretz Yisrael, Magveu Mimos Eretz Yisrael. Then the Eretz Yisrael currency is used to pay. Kesubos Stam, if a bill of collection is written but without the land region mentioned in it, Hotzio Bebavel, Magbeo Mimos Bavel. If the creditor, the lender, pulls out the document to collect from the borrower in Bavel, so he's paid with Bavel currency. Hotzio Eretz Yisrael, Magbeo Mimos Eretz Yisrael. Likewise, if the document is pulled out in Eretz Yisrael, payment is made using the Israeli type currency. Kesubos Kesef Stam. It says, the text would say 100 pieces of silver, 100 silvers were loaned. It doesn't say, was it the Selah type coin, 100 sloim, or 100 dinarim? A dinar is a quarter of a selah, or 100 punyonim. A punyon is a small fraction of a selah. It doesn't say what. It just says that a loan of kesef was extended. Mashi yirtze loive magbeu. Whatever the lover wants to pay, even the very small coin called isarin or isar in the plural isarin, he can pay back even these very small coins. And then this Tanaic source closes with a closing clause, Ma she'en kein b'ksuba, which is not the case regarding the ksuba. Ahei, what is that closing phrase referring to when it says Ma she'en kein b'ksuba? Amar of Misharshia, Aresha. It's a phrase that refers to the beginning of the source. Lafuke midrab Shimon Gamliel diomar ksuba daraisa. This source is to the exclusion of Reb Shimon Gamliel, who says ksuba is daraisa. According to Reb Shimon Gamliel, the ksuba payment is going to be based on where the initial marriage took place. This source is saying that it's going to be paid wherever the ksuba is shown, is collected. So that's not like the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who said that the ksuba payment is determined by the initial place of obligation. Just to go over that point again in a more precise fashion, the Reisha of this source said, Hamotzi shtar kol v'chaver, and it said Kesubos, and there was written in it, which would indicate the place that the initial obligation was established. So the Reisha says that whatever the initial place of obligation is stated, that's how the payment is going to be made. So that is as far as a shtar chov. Then the end of this source says, not so in the case of ksuba. Namely, in the case of ksuba, it might have written in the place of initial obligation, but the payment is not going to be made on that basis. And that approach is to the exclusion of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Kesubos kesef stam, again, a quote from the source. We saw just 2 lines above. If it just says kesef in it, doesn't say what kind of kesef. It doesn't specify the denomination that had been loaned. Whatever the lover wants to pay back, he can pay back. Obviously, he'll want to pay back the least amount. The Gemara asks, V'emo naska. Maybe he has to pay naska. Naska is a bar of silver. It's not even something minted. Omar HaRav Ozer, Dichsiv Bei Matbe'a. The case of the shtar chov that is featured in the Brisa says in it, Mea, it would say, for example, Mea Matbe'a Kesef, 100 silver coins. Now that would exclude the naska suggestion. V'emo priti, maybe the matbe'a that's referred to is a priti. Now priti is a very small coin that in general were copper coins. And what is the suggesting here? that he should pay, let's say, copper coins. It said, for example, it said Mea. It said 100 matbea, and the love, the borrower would pay back 100 priti. The Rashi says, "V'toimar shitein lo nechoshes," 100 copper coins. O kesef shave mea prutos, or silver having the value of 100 prutos. So if 100 prutos equals $2, you would give $2 in silver. Omar Rav Papa, priti de kaspa lo avdi inchi. Once the shtar mentions in it the word matbea and the word kesef, that excludes the suggestion of priti, because people do not make make out of silver very small coins. Before we continue, we glance at the side. We have a nosei topic heading, which says Li'olam Yodur Odom Be'eretz Yisrael. I'm sure everyone got this impression earlier from the previous Mishnah. That is the Mishnah we just learned, that everyone ought to live in the land of Israel. And the Gemara will also mention people who live outside the land of Israel are viewed as if they are idol worshippers. And the Gemara will cite a basis and sources, psukim, for that concept. Tanu Rabbanan, L'olam Yodur Odom Be'eretz Yisrael. A person should strive and live in the land of Israel. Afilu be'ir sheruba oivdei kechavim, even if that city is a majority idol worshippers. In other words, the excuse being, there are a lot of goyim there. That's not an excuse to not to come to Israel. V'al yodur b'chutz la'aretz. And one should not dwell outside of the land of Israel, even in a city that is of a majority Jewish population. Anyone who lives in Israel, he appears as one that has a God. God, we say, means God Almighty, the Creator of heaven and earth. And anyone who dwells outside of Israel, it creates the impression that he doesn't have a God. Shenemar, the pasuk, and again here it's a function of what do the verses say. It says in the pasuk, Lo seis lochem es eretz Canaan, liyos lochem leilokim. The land of Canaan, which is called the land of Israel, is given to the Jewish people in order for God to be your God. Question: V'chi kol she'eno dor ba'aretz ein lo eloka. Can you say that anyone who doesn't dwell in Israel doesn't have a God? Of course he has a God. Elo lomar loch kol ador b'chutz la'aretz. Anyone who lives outside of Israel, ki'ilu oived avodas kechavim. It is viewed as if he is an idol worshipper. V'chein b'David hu omer, concerning one of the greatest of our people, King David. It says, David himself says, Ki gershuni hayom mistapeach benachlas Hashem leimor lech avod Elohim achirim. I was chased out from the land of God, from the inheritance of God, told, go worship other gods. Who told David to go serve other gods? What the pasuk is telling us is, anyone who dwells outside the land of Israel, ki'ilu oived avodas kechavim. It is tantamount to idol worship. There is a major issue that is discussed in halachic literature, which of course is way beyond the purview of our Gemara markings, Daf Yomi Shurim, is regarding the level of obligation, the applicability of what we just learned. But suffice it to say, it's a topic that should not be taken lightly. Make no assumptions, and everyone should look into the matter and arrive at a truly halachic conclusion. And we have a very dramatic story and give and take that follows. On the side, in introducing the geometric forms that we see now, we have a trapezoid or volcano shape that will appear in alternating directions. The nosei mivneh, heading on the side, features the trapezoid or the volcano with the top, the narrow, facing upwards. That's Rabbi Zera speaking, and the inverted is Rav Yehuda. And we will see a machlokes b'kol ha'ola miBavel le'eretz Yisrael im oiver ba'aseh. One who leaves Babylonia in favor of, in order to come to the land of Israel, is that considered a violation of a positive command? The positive command being remain in Babylonia. So the story starts. Rabbi Zera havekomishtamit minei de Rav Yehuda. There was a certain point at which Rabbi Zera, mishtamit is a term meaning to avoid. He didn't want to have a direct contact or confront Rabbi Yehuda. And why was he avoiding Rabbi Yehuda? The ball, the Mesak l'Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Zera wanted to leave Bavel to go to Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Yehuda would have protested Rabbi Zera's plan. So he avoided being the subject of a direct protest of Rabbi Yehuda. The Omer of Yehuda, anyone who leaves the land of Babylon for the purpose of going to Israel is in violation of a positive command. Shinemar, there is a pasuk, and we continue at the top of Daf Kuf Yud Aleph. Bavela yuvo v'shama yu ad yoim pokti oisam neum Hashem. Translated, they are to go to Bavel, or they are brought to Bavel, and there they shall remain until the day I order them otherwise. Thus saith the Almighty. The Tosfos points out that even though this pasuk is from the book of Yirmiyahu, that is a reference to the Golus Rishon, the first exile during the time of the Babylonian destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and Eretz Yisrael. So they were to go to Bavel. That's what the pasuk says. We know very well that there was a return to the land of Israel during what we call the second, with regard to the second return, the second temple period, and that was orchestrated by the Almighty with prophets, great leaders like Ezra, Nehemiah. So once you might say that, well, once this pasuk was stated in the time of the first Golus, they shall remain in Bavel, and then we added until God commands otherwise. He commanded otherwise in the second Beis Hamikdash period. So finished. What's Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda we should have emphasized is at a time after the second Beis Hamikdash period. So it's a non-starter. So Tosfos says that even though this pasuk is referring to the Golus Rishon, the pasuk is concerned also with the Golus Sheni, that once they are exiled back to Bavel, so they must remain there until the Lord commands otherwise. So that's Rav Yehuda's point. Rav Yehuda was living in Bavel. Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Zera, there was a large Babylonian community, and Rav Yehuda's take on that was that they are to remain there in Babylon until the Almighty says otherwise, even to the extent of not leaving Babylon, Bavel or Babylonia, to go to Eretz Yisrael. For Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Zera says that pasuk isn't a reference to a command regarding the Jewish people. It rather is a description of the temple vessels, that in the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the temple vessels were brought to the land of Bavel, and there they shall remain until God orders otherwise. So it's a command. It's not necessarily a command even, but rather it is a prophecy of Yirmiyahu concerning the temple vessels. And Rashi explains that that's quite likely because the pasuk right before this is dealing with the temple vessels. So in context, it seems to be a very clear reference to the temple vessels. Now, as a result of this, it seems that and then the Gemara now has Rav Yehuda. What does he say in response? So Rav Yehuda says, you might have a point about that, but ksiv kro achrina. There's another pasuk from which I derive my shita, my opinion that one is not to leave Babylonia. What does the pasuk say? Hishpati eschem b'nois Yerushalayim b'tzvos u'b'aylis hasodeh v'chulei. I command you, the Jewish people, not to become aroused, not to leave Bavel. For Rabbi Zera, what does Rabbi Zera say about that? Hahu shelo yalu Yisrael b'choma. Rabbi Zera says that the pasuk whereby the Jewish people are sworn not to become aroused and go to Eretz Yisrael, it means as an entire single mass. I am not going to Israel as part of a single entire mass. I want to go to Eretz Yisrael as an individual. The Rashi at the top says, Shelo yalu b'choima, yachad biyad chazaka, all together with force. So that the Jewish people were bound by oath not to rise as an entire nation, leaving the exile together with force. But as we said a moment ago, but as far as an individual is concerned, Rabbi Zera was very enthusiastic in going to Eretz Yisrael. For Rabbi Yehuda, so what does Rabbi Yehuda say about that? He says, as far as Yalu B'choima is concerned, Shbati Achrino Ksiv. There's another Shavua that indicates they shall not arise B'choima. And we've noted along the way the psukim, the first pasuk, this pasuk that was quoted by Rav Yehuda regarding the prohibition of going to Eretz Yisrael from Bavel was Shir HaShir and Perek Beis pasuk Zayin. Rav Yehuda says, not only do you have Perek Beis pasuk Zayin, but you also have Perek Gimel pasuk Hey. So that, as far as Rav Yehuda is concerned, you have two psukim. One, a warning to the individual, and the other a warning to the mass. For Rabbi Zera, well, what does Rabbi Zera say about that second Hishbati pasuk? Hahu miboyalev Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. I need that additional pasuk as part of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina's teaching. Di Omar Shloisha Shavuos Halolu Lama. This is a reference to three psukim in Shir HaShirim, Perek Beis pasuk Zayin, Perek Gimel pasuk Hey, Perek Hey pasuk Ches. These oaths that we saw already, Hishbati, we saw Hishbati Eschem B'nois Yerushalayim, we saw references to these psukim already. Here there are a total of three in the meantime. What do I need them for? Achas Shelo Yalu Yisrael B'choma. Bear in mind, this is Rabbi Zera speaking. He says that one is a warning against a mass, forceful return to Israel. V'achas Shishbia HaKadosh Baruch Hu Es Yisrael Shelo Yimrudu B'umos Ha'olam. And one is that the Jewish people were bound not to rebel against the nations of the world, but rather in the state of exile they should remain cooperative citizens. And v'achas shishbi HaKadosh Baruch Hu es oivdei kechavim shelo yishtabdu bohen b'Yisrael yoser midai. And a third shvua is that it's upon the goyim not to subdue the Jews, enslave the Jews, subjugate the Jews too much. Certainly, we can, with the hindsight of history, we can see that the idol worshippers, the goyim, have certainly violated that shvua many, many, many times. For Rav Yehuda, well, up till this point, then, according to Rabbi Zera, the shvuas psukim that Rabbi Yehuda cited are already used up. So, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Im ta'iru v'im ta'iru. That in the shvuas pasuk, you have actually two shvuas. The double expression im ta'iru v'im ta'iru then accounts for an additional shvua, and that will include the prohibition of the individual from coming to Eretz Yisrael from Babylonia. For Rabbi Zera, who was interested in coming to Eretz Yisrael and yes, leaving Babylonia to Eretz Yisrael, mi boyale l'chede Rebbe Levi. We'll say that now that we're accounting for an additional shvua, Rabbi Zera says, I have an accounting for that in accordance with Rabbi Levi's teaching. The Yomar Sheish Shvuos Halalu Lama. There are actually 6 shvuos, and now this is a function of we mentioned the double shvua that's mentioned in one of the psukim in Ta'uru. So you can note, we have a little note with a double star on the side of the Gemara, that in Perek Beis Posuk Zayin and Perek Gimel Posuk Hey, you have there Im To'iru Im Ta'uru. So that right there, you've got 4 shvuos accounted for. So that's, as we said, that's you have the Im To'iru Im Ta'uru, and you've got also Perek, and that's in addition to the Hishbati expression. So it would seem then that the Hishbati, maybe I should correct myself that before it's not necessarily the double expression in Im Toru that accounts for the extra shvuos, but the fact that it says Im Toru in each one of the psukim that were mentioned in addition to the Hishbati. Whatever the case is, you will be able to account for 4 shvuos if you look at it as that, thusly. And then you have Perek Hey Posuk Ches, which is an additional shvuah, and Perek Ches Posuk Dalid, an additional shvuah. So if you use that as your method of accounting, you will account for 6 shvuos. It struck me now, maybe it's just a detail, but the psukim that mentioned Hishbati and Im To'iru Im Ta'oru, the double expression Im To'iru Im Ta'oru, each one, Im To'iru is connected with Hishbati, and Im Ta'oru is connected with Hishbati. So that the double expression that you find in 2 psukim gets you to 4 shvuos. And as we said, in addition to that, the 2 additional ones getting you to a total of 6. So now 6 shvuos appear, 6 oaths appear. Rabbi Zera continues. Tlosa Hani Damoran. The 3 are those that we already mentioned, that Rabbi Zera already accounted for 3 of the 6. Enoch, the additional oath by which the Jewish people are bound, is number 4. Shelo Yigalu Es HaKetz. That means prophets that lived amongst the Jewish people shall not reveal to them when the actual end of days is going to be. Number 5, V'shelo Yirachaku Es HaKetz. We should not cause the end to be distanced. The Rashi on the second line from the top says, "V'shelo Yirachaku Es HaKetz ba'avonam," through sinning. Lishnachrinu shelo yidchaku garsinon. Instead of Yirachaku, a dalid appears instead of the resh. Loshem dochak shelo yarbu betachnunim al kach yosim midai. A fascinating point that the Jewish people are exhorted not to pray too hard, to overdo it prayer-wise for the final redemption. Very interesting idea. Next, number 6, v'shelo yigalu hasoid le'ovdei kechavim. The Jewish people are warned not to reveal the secret to the Gentiles. What is that a reference to? So 2 pshatim in Rashi. One has to do with the lunar calculations. It's called Sodo Ibor. And another explanation is the teaching of the reasons behind the mitzvahs of the Torah. Even the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, the 7 Noahide laws which the Gentiles are obligated to observe, the depth of them, the reasons behind them, that is not to be revealed to them. There's a basic isur in the teaching of Torah to Ovdei Kechavim, to idol worshippers. The pasuk said, "B'tzvois o ba'ailos hasadeh." We saw this as quoted already on the 4th line from the top. Omar Rebbe Ozer, Omar le'em HaKadosh Baruch Hu liYisrael, Im atem mekaymin es hashvua mutav. If you observe the oaths, then fine. V'im lav, if you violate the shvuas, ani matir es besarchem, I will declare unowned, I will leave for as open game your flesh. Kitzvoi size asada, like these are wild animals that people hunt. In other words, if you violate my shvuas, then you will in effect be a hunted people. Amir Tzashem, of course, we will be zeiche to see the great redemption soon in our days. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.